All right. Hi there, everyone. My name is Tom Levine. I'm Cornerstone's resident techie. Specifically, I'm our commissions and technical specialist. And today we're going to be going over what the cloud even really is. I know a lot of people have a lot of questions about it, and the way it's advertised is not very clear. So today we're going to be getting to the heart of what exactly the cloud is and how it can help you and your business. Just a few bookkeeping things up ahead of everything. If you have a question, please go ahead and submit it in our questions box. At the very worst, I'll loop back and answer questions at the end of the presentation. But if something urgent comes up, or if you want to ask a question while it's present, or while you think I could answer it and stay on topic, please don't hesitate to enter it into the question area, and I will take a look at it and see if I think I can answer it then. Also, don't hesitate to reach out to me directly if you don't feel like asking a question during the webinar. I'm pretty good about getting back to people. Just make sure you include Tech Tuesday or some sort of tech-related headline in the subject of your email. You can reach out to me at tlevine@crnstone.com or by calling the number on your screen. And don't feel like you have to jot that down now. I'll go ahead and put this back up again at the very end of the presentation. Last, before we get started, please don't hesitate to register for our cash incentive program. If you don't register, it's almost like letting money walk out the door. The top qualifiers, I believe we're going to have up to 15 qualifiers are going to earn a cash reward. There will be $6,000 winners, and the rest is up on your screen, with a top qualifier earning up to $7,000 in cash. That's for group and individual new business sales sold between January 1st of this year, 2021, and December 31st. You will earn points that bring you closer to the $7,000 cash prize, and anyone who goes online and registers is able. So www.crnstone.com/cash incentive program is where you would go for that. So that being said, what the heck is a cloud? And no, I'm not talking about clouds from a millennial's vape. I mean internet clouds. That would be things like cloud computing, cloud storage, or cloud hosting, which I'm sure is kind of new to a lot of people. Based on popular culture and based on commercials for the cloud, I wouldn't be surprised if you think the cloud's something abstract, something that isn't, physically located anywhere, maybe something a little bit special with computing, something that is secure maybe, or insecure, depending on, what you've heard. Or I've even seen commercials saying that it's literally in the atmosphere, which is not correct at all. Popular Meter really doesn't do a good job of describing what the cloud really is, and if you're not a tech person, it can seem almost magic. The ability to just sort of grab your data from anywhere to do anything you want without owning any hardware online seems kind of magical on its head. So with that out of the way, there are a few things you need to understand before we get into what the cloud really is. If you attended my last webinar, that would be how to set up your own Wi-Fi. Some of this might look a little familiar to you, but I didn't display it this way. This picture is what the internet is as a whole. And in order to understand the cloud, you've got to understand what this is as well. Let's go ahead and start by talking about this part of the drawing right here. This would be what we covered in our last webinar. You start with your computer that connects to your local area network, which is your Wi-Fi. If you're wired, then you just hit Internet Explorer, and that is this link in the chain right here. You have your modem and router, and that forwards information to your ISP, which is right here. Let's go ahead and clear these drawings real quick. All right, here we go. So it starts at your computer, goes to your internet infrastructure. That would be your modem. then your requests to access websites go to your internet service provider. The ISP would be like Time Warner Cable, which is now Spectrum, AT&T, whoever you personally pay to access the internet. That is this link in the chain right here. And that is about as far as most people get with their understanding and knowledge of what the internet is. All the internet is a bunch of interconnected computers. And what your ISP does when it receives a request and you say, hey, I want to go to google.com, is they then send out a request through a bunch of other interconnected servers, and maybe they send out a request to a satellite, which sends it to a data center, and so on and so forth, until they get to the internet service provider, who is connecting whatever website you're trying to access to the web. They then send on your request to say, go to Google onto Google's server. Google sees your request and says, oh, they're trying to access our website, and sends all of their information all the way back to you. And that's basically how the internet works in a nutshell. It's important you understand what this is at first in order to understand what cloud computing is, because all cloud computing is this, what we just described. What happens is your computer sends information to a web server or any sort of large computer located online. That computer then has all the data you're accessing and sends it back to you. And that's what cloud computing is. It's very straightforward. It's complex to set up, and I wouldn't recommend anyone trying to set up their own cloud server. But in essence, when people say, oh, I use cloud technology, that's all they're saying, is they're using information that's stored on the internet to, help part of their business. That being said, it also helps to understand the difference between what one of these web servers is and what your home computer is. So let's get into that a little bit. A web server is a very big computer, and it handles a lot of different users at once. You could not only be the one using a server, but a lot of different people could too. If you work at a somewhat larger or medium-sized business, you probably have a local, drive on your system, or a place where all of, your people go to access data that's not locally, your computer. And that's what a server is. It's a very large, computer that can handle a lot of requests at once. It's typically made of one machine, but it can also be, in the case of cloud computing, likely multiple servers, worked or linked together. So it's not just one computer, it's like 2, 3, or 4 of these large machines. And typically a server can run for months at a time, or, can run multiple versions of the same thing at once, so that you can take one machine offline and the rest of it's still running. Everyone can still access data. Then you put it back in and it runs. So the main difference that I'd focus on between, servers and personal computers are their size and scope of calculation, along with, their reliability. A server might be designed not to, crunch a bunch of numbers at once, but instead be designed to be very reliable and able to do a few things, for a very long period of time. Your personal computer, or a PC, typically will need turned off at least once a week, very frequently. And while it's turned off, you can't access it, while it's offline. It's really intended for one person to use, and not as much with more, newer computers, but older computers, definitely, you couldn't run multiple, profiles on them at once. It's also capable of only running a few different applications. If you notice, a personal computer will slow down the more you have open. So like if you have, Excel open along with a PDF, along with your email, along with, multiple tabs in a web browser, you might notice your computer going a bit slow. If you did the same thing on a server, you wouldn't see that issue at all. Also, it has a lot of updates that you'll tend to need for security, whereas a server, not as much. It might need updated once every 6 months versus once every month or once every 2 weeks. So That being said, now that you generally understand what the cloud is, what is the cloud commercially? What is, what you see those commercials on TV for saying, "Oh, sign up for our cloud service. We're here for you and we'll take all the computing over." What really is it? Well, the cloud can be real or not. It's typically a server or a group of servers working together to provide computational service, or the same service as your desktop or laptop that you're watching this on, but remotely. It's a bunch of things networked together to act as one computer. They don't all need to be in the same place. Some cloud computation is done with servers in Anaheim, some in Korea, some in France, all over. And they don't need to be in one physical location. They also do not all need to be running the exact same thing. A cloud server is typically something that runs, what you're accessing in this tiny little part of the server, but right next to it, someone else's computation could be running. Right next to it, someone's entire database could be, running, and you're just accessing a tiny little bit of this one server's services. So they don't all need to be doing the same thing at once. Also, they can be physical or virtual. So this is where cloud computing's advertisement is somewhat true. The server that you're accessing remotely, so your cloud server, I'm going to stop referring to it by that for now, but let's, instead of cloud, say remote server. Let's say you're accessing a remote server or computer, and you've bought X amount of space on this computer. That X amount of space doesn't all have to be on one machine. It could be split up between 2 or 3 different machines running anywhere in the world. So if someone asks, okay, where is your cloud located? Like, where is your, remote computer located? You couldn't really give them a good answer. But you could say, well, my cloud is through, like, Carbonite, or it's through, Gmail, or through my Google Drive. And that's about as good a location as you could give them. It's not necessarily a physical thing, but it is real. And it's computable space that is taken out of some company's computing power. And that's about as precise a definition as you could ever probably give them for your location. You could give them the web address of your server, because everything is connected via the internet, but that might be about all. And that's kind of the hardest part about cloud computing to grasp. It doesn't need to be something, real, so to speak. It doesn't need to be just one machine that you point at and say that's where it is. But it does have to sort of be a registered connection of devices. And so long as the cloud hosting person or the remote server owner can point repeatedly to where that is in their network of devices, you've got an actual location for your cloud. So that all might have sounded a little complex and kind of taped together, or hashed together from multiple services. But what makes it useful for business? You might think, oh, that's really cool that a bunch of computers can talk to each other and pretend to be one big space or something. But how is that useful to me? Well, it's useful because you don't have to own the equipment. You don't have to own your own server. You don't need to bother taking care of it or hiring IT staff to service the server. You don't need to, maintain your database, because that's also typically maintained by a cloud hosting provider if you're putting your entire database out there. You also have a secure backup of your information. Let's say that your computer gets infected with ransomware, and you've got all your client information now locked behind a paywall. Let's say a hacker says, oh, if you send me, like $1 million, then I'll give you access to your information again. Well, because you have all your information on the cloud backup or some sort of backup, you don't have to pay them for your data. You've got it all, and you can just say, "Well, that's really cool of you. Thanks. I'm going to wipe my device, and you take care." So it's a form of theft protection. You also, if you store your information on a cloud, can access it anywhere from any device connected. So as long as you can approve the device or go through a secure login, having the information located at a remote data center online means you can pretty much pull it up anywhere, from an iPad, from whatever phone you're using, or in the office. So just the ease of access is good. And lastly, you can use a cloud server to even host a full website. I mean, it is just a server that's normally used to host websites. So you're able to put all of your information online and host your website safely without owning your own hardware. So that's pretty cool in my opinion as well. So it saves you a bunch of money in the long run if you're doing a lot of work online. Some things to be aware of, though, if you're trying to set up a cloud storage or cloud computer in general, or if you're using the cloud generally. The first is that it isn't magic. A lot of commercials will tell you, "Oh, it's super secure. It's really easy to use. It's wonderful." And well, that might be true, it isn't magic. So you do have to obey standard practice and make sure you're not clicking on things and, infecting your cloud server with viruses. All the communication with a cloud server, just personal recommendation, should be done through a VPN. That's because people can see that, your computer's accessing information, but it then won't be able to tell what that information is that you're accessing, where on the internet your cloud server is located, all of that. If someone's monitoring what you're doing, they can only see, oh, you're talking to a VPN. So it's a lot more secure. The other thing to be aware of with cloud computing, especially if you're storing, HIPAA-related information on the cloud, or if you're just backing up all of your local information to the cloud, is that liability is then shared for HIPAA and other certifications. If you're trying to, back up a bunch of HIPAA-related information, you've got to make sure that you're using a HIPAA-approved cloud service and that you're communicating all of that through a VPN. But as far as the actual storage of that data is concerned, that would then put the cloud service provider on the hook for obeying HIPAA law. Some businesses, because of this, might be better off just using their own hardware and using maybe a few smaller data services just to back up information, which is what I personally would recommend if you're looking into some sort of cloud computing for insurance. So real quick, let's talk about the two most ubiquitous providers of cloud service, this being Google Drive and the Apple iCloud. If you're a fan of Apple services, I'm sorry here, it does not always meet HIPAA requirement. Well, your Google Drive is somewhat HIPAA compliant. You need to subscribe to the G Suite and actually physically pay for the premium service of Google Meet in order for that service to be fully HIPAA certified. You have to sign a business associate agreement with Google. You can do that actually as well through the link that I'm going to put up here in the chat at the end of our webinar. And you also need to, here, let's go back, sorry about that. You need to sign up and enable two-factor authentication to obey HIPAA certification in full. You will also need to be able to manage employee permissions accessing that Google Drive. So you need to be able to assign every person logging in and accessing that drive a Google account, and then manage actively what parts of that Google account they can access for the Google Drive. The iCloud, however, is not HIPAA compliant. There is no business associates agreement used, which already breaks HIPAA. And while it's relatively secure, it doesn't obey all of the information logging and tracking information that you would typically have for HIPAA requirements. Per the terms and conditions on their website, if you're a covered business entity or if you're a component entity that needs to use and obey HIPAA, it forbids you from using their association in any manner. So that being said, let's say you don't want to use those two services. What can you do to ensure that your individual cloud provider is covered fully by HIPAA and you're not breaking any laws as a health insurance provider? First thing you should do is aim for SSAE 18 compliance software. What that is another form of certification for tech that is a lot more restrictive than just HIPAA or high tech. SSAE 18 is the specification required for secure financial transactions. So if you are already, covered by SSAE 18 for your cloud service, you're going to be covered by HIPAA or high tech, and you've overshot your goal. So that's just useful in general. If you're talking to a sales rep for this cloud service, these are some questions I would ask as well. First off, how long have you been in operation? I tend to prefer using a cloud service that's been in operation more than 3 years. That's just so they've, had experience and know what to do as far as anything's, coming up or any sort of issue that might happen with your cloud server, you've got support. Another question is, how long have you been specializing in HIPAA compliant hosting? That's just a great question to ask in general to make sure that the cloud service you're getting has experience with HIPAA. Another question is, how much flexibility will I have to change my system? This could be anything from adding, space in the future to your cloud service, or as much as maybe, how many times am I allowed to download and access information from your cloud service? Also, what makes up your physical and logistical network security? That's a good question, but they might not always give you a straight answer. Security is also about secrecy, so they might have some things in place that they won't tell you. The last two questions, are you HIPAA certified and high tech certified? Those two things are required for the insurance industry, and like I already said, if you've already got service that is SSAE 18 compliant, you don't even need to bother. So that being said, what are my personal recommendations for using cloud services? Well, my favorite is actually Atlantic.net. I like them a lot. They've got a lot of support and they've got a wide variety of products. I was unable to confirm their prices directly because they only answer service inquiry requests. But you can talk to them directly at 888-618-3282 or online, and I'm going to link that here in a moment. There's also Amazon Web Services. That'll be $25 a month for a full terabyte, or if you think you'll need to back up a little less information, you can lower that and that'll lower the cost. Terabyte being the amount of space that you'd have to back up. Also for service that honestly is one of the better options if you're just trying to back up data online, I'd recommend Carbonite. Carbonite, you can back up to 25 computers if you're a small business for $24 a month, or if you're a larger, insurance operation and you're trying to back up all of your server information and everything else, it'd be $50 a month. You can access this information all online like a typical cloud service, but not only that, let's say you got ransomware and you've got a hacker trying to say, oh, well, yeah, I'll block all attempts for you to download all your data. So you've got to pay me. You don't have to. One thing that Carbonite will do is they will actually send you physical copies of all your data if needed, and they are fully HIPAA compliant. So if you need to, you can literally get a bunch of CDs or USB drives and just transfer all that information back into your computers. So that makes them really useful as well. Real quick, here are all the things that I referenced using this presentation on screen. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me directly. I'm going to jump out of the presentation real quick so I can put up those helpful links in the chat that I referenced earlier. But if you have any questions at this time, please feel free to let me know. And I will post those links here in a minute. First thing I'm going to put in the chat is the link to that Google HIPAA compliant service agreement. Here, I'm just gonna put it here real quick for you in the chat box. then I'm also going to link each of these services one by one that I mentioned. First, if you're trying to go to the Atlantic, here is the link. If you're trying to access Amazon Web Services, here they are. And last but not least, we also have Carbonite, and that is what I'd recommend for a smaller business for sure. A larger business, you might be able to find a deal elsewhere, but I think their service is second to none. And there we go. All right, so if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the question box. I am here for a few more moments, so if you have any questions, feel free to let me know.